on one hand, we have established through the risk assessment the safety of correct use. How is it implemented? On one hand, through good agricultural practices, that means this kind of basic rules to apply to safely use whatever kind of product, which means, for instance, don't discard empty bottles somewhere into the water, or don't avoid spraying into flowering crops whenever possible, and so on. On the other hand, there's also beyond that further steps possible in terms of application technology, because also application technology can contribute to even further reduce the exposure of pollinators. That we already discussed. As an example here, we can, as I already mentioned here, for instance, information of beekeepers, what you are applying, using bee-friendly products where possible. I mean, it's frequently a choice which product you apply against which pest. So when there is a flowering crop, it's always the better choice to go with a bee-friendly, a non-bee toxic product if you can choose. Spraying outside the flowering period is always preferable if possible, or spraying crops during a time of the day when bees are not active. That can, for instance, under temperate conditions be in the evening, or under tropical conditions it's frequently over middays when bees are not active. As I mentioned, application technology can also contribute to safeguard the safe use for bees. For instance, drift reducing nozzles that prevent that substances are drifted out of the field where you are spraying into flowering weeds or neighboring flowering crops where bees may be. And it's not only protecting bees but also a lot of other organisms. Or buffer zones that you, for instance, are careful when you have a crop that you are treating, but next to it there is, let's say, beehives or bee-attractive plants where there's a lot of bees. A completely different measure, because this is not actually ensuring the safety of certain products to bees, but which is in a very general term helpful to enhance the health of pollinators in the agricultural landscape, are so-called ecological enhancement measures. That means measures that bring more pollinator biodiversity into the agricultural landscape. And that can be done with flowering patches, flowering strips, nesting opportunities for bees, all these landscape elements that in many modern, intensively grown landscapes are more and more missing. That can very much help to bring back the pollinators into the field, and it may in some cases also in some crops be helpful to increase pollination, because out of these kind of flowering areas or natural vegetation areas there may come pollinators which are relevant for the crop. Of course, this is very much regionally specific where it makes sense and where not. It's crop specific, and it's also very specific relating to certain agricultural practices. For instance, in a smallholder farming environment that probably makes less sense than in an environment of intensive monocropping.